bottle ended up, so the crab decides to dispose of him. At that time, SpongeBob appears and says he will handle the little guy. He then forms a bubble around Plankton and, after asking Mr. Krabs for forgiveness, runs off with the villain. At that time, the owner of the Krusty Krab is convinced that his most loyal employee had betrayed him. The residents try to burst the bubble to stop them from escaping, but the duo manages to escape. Without the Krabby Patties, in just a few hours, the apocalypse begins at Bikini Bottom. Burger Beard claims that this is the end of the story, but the seagulls do not accept this end. One of the birds tries to steal the book, but only manages to tear off a page, which ends up falling into the sea. At the bottom of the ocean, the city was at war. Sandy is the only one safe in her house. While watching the news, she eats the last Krabby Patty left in all of Bikini Bottom. Patrick appears and, outside, watches her devour that delicious burger. Seconds later, the squirrel finds out, through the TV, that the Krusty Krab has gone bankrupt. When he arrives at his house, SpongeBob bursts the bubble where he and Plankton were and soon finds Patrick. The starfish is completely freaked out and SpongeBob invites him to help find the secret formula. Patrick accepts the invitation to be part of the team, but, at the first opportunity, grabs his friend and announces to the other residents that he managed to capture him. However, SpongeBob manages to escape and runs to Sandy's house as she is the only one who can help him now. Upon arriving there, he discovers that the squirrel has gone mad. Sandy shows the last page of the book that had fallen into the sea and claims that the sandwich gods are angry with the inhabitants of Bikini Bottom. At this point, SpongeBob is convinced that he can't count on the squirrel and decides to go to his pineapple in hopes of finding Gary. When he gets home, he finds that the place has been invaded and everything has been destroyed. Worried about his pet snail, SpongeBob keeps looking for him, until he finds a trail of goo. The sponge notices that Gary is nearby and runs towards him, but now he has become the king of snails and was no longer by SpongeBob's side. Gary orders his snails to get Plankton in the square pants, but the snails are extremely slow, so the pair manage to escape. They decide to spend the night away from the city to ensure their safety. While SpongeBob sleeps, Plankton decides to get into his brain to find out where he hid the formula. However, he is surprised to find an extremely sweet place. Everything is very happy and colorful in that world, which makes Plankton want to get out of there at all costs. Suddenly, the cotton candy clumps together and forms a kitten. The villain puts everything out when he comes across so much cuteness and ends up releasing a rainbow through his mouth. When he finally manages to get out of that place, SpongeBob wakes up and reveals that he had a very crazy dream about him. However, upon realizing that the little guy is full of cotton candy, he discovers that Plankton has invaded his brain. He is disappointed that he does not have his partner's trust and states that they need to trust each other as they are now. The pirate parks across the street, along with other trailers, and chases the seagulls off their boat, which soon transforms into a food truck. However, the birds refuse to leave without knowing the end of the story and Burger Beard offers them a snack while they wait. What those seagulls didn't expect is that the man would serve them a pair of spicy wings and they soon wonder where their friend Kyle is. Frightened, the birds leave and Kyle comes out of the bathroom. The pirate then uses his megaphone to scare him away and the scare is so great that the animal loses all its feathers. Unable to fly, Kyle takes a mini-taxi and leaves. At Krusty Krab, Sandy appears and shares with the villagers her theory about them pissing off the burger gods. She claims that only a sacrifice can calm them down. At that time, SpongeBob appears with the Krabby Patty formula and the crowd goes wild. He explains to Mr. Krabs how he managed to find her. Meanwhile, Patrick enters the photo booth and takes a trip back in time. Upon opening the bottle, the crab discovers that it is not the secret formula, but a mocking note from Plankton. The little guy says that SpongeBob took the wrong bottle and Mr. Krabs says they will be sacrificed. Suddenly, Patrick returns with the time machine, and along with him is a Squidosaurus Rex. The animal starts chasing the villagers and everyone flees in despair. Plankton blames the whole disaster on SpongeBob because he had stolen the wrong bottle. But SquarePants claims he didn't know there were two bottles and they start to argue. Plankton says that SpongeBob is the worst partner he could ever have and the sponge starts to freak out. He knocks over the trash can and throws everything he sees on the ground. Then it mixes recyclable garbage with organic, which it would never do if it were in its normal state. When he realizes what he has just done, SpongeBob tries to calm down and confesses that he has been infected by madness. To fix things and get everything back to the way it was before, he offers himself to be used as a sacrifice. The inhabitants of Bikini Bottom are quick to take the idea. SpongeBob is chained and about to be crushed by a giant rock. As he is about to be executed, he begins to smell a distant Krabby Patty and Mr. Krabs orders the executioner to cut the rope. However, before SquarePants is crushed, Mr. Krabs holds the big rock and states that he is also smelling Krabby Patty. He decides to use SpongeBob as a sniffer dog to go after those burgers. At that time, everyone rips off their apocalyptic clothes and starts following him. After facing a long journey, they discover that the smell is coming from the surface and are disappointed that they cannot breathe out of water. Faced with this new challenge, everyone decides to return to Bikini Bottom, except for the protagonists, of course. As they try to find a way to survive on the surface, the mysterious dolphin appears and thanks SpongeBob for making him lose his job. Bubbles says that, a few years ago, he already realized that he needed a change, but he didn't have the courage to do it. As a way of repaying him, the animal claims that it will bring SpongeBob and his friends safely to the surface. Bubbles catches them in his mouth and throws them on the beach. Now they need to cross that sea of sand without being attacked by bathers. Patrick tries to ask a giant foot for directions, but soon SpongeBob realizes that it's actually a furry porpoise that ran aground out of the water. They try to help it return to the ocean, but the animal is extremely heavy and they are trapped under it. A few minutes later, they manage to escape by digging in the sand and end up in a girl's castle. Her brother is annoyed upon detecting the invaders and kicks them away. Patrick got very lucky and ended up falling into another kid's ice cream. Squidward ends up on a woman's back and can't get out of there, as he keeps slipping because of the sunscreen. Seeing the starfish devouring his ice cream, the boy throws the food away and Squidward is eventually saved. Sandy and SpongeBob end up on a beach umbrella. The man sees the object moving and tries to close it. He then opens it again and the pair are launched onto a deck, where Mr. Krabs was. Now that they're back together, SpongeBob and Patrick are full of energy after devouring a giant cotton candy. When the sugar wears off, they continue to follow the Krabby Patty's unique aroma. However, they are at imminent risk of being run over by pedestrians, so they decide to use a bicycle for transport. While SpongeBob and Patrick pedal, Sandy and the others drive the two-wheeler. In this way, they quickly manage to get to Burger Beard's food truck, which he called home of the Krabby Patty. While the pirate was preparing the burgers, he was surprised by Mr. Krabs and his friends. The crab orders the man to return the formula and he claims that the arrival of the Bikini Bottom protagonists is not in the book. Finally, Burger Beard reveals that, to steal the secret formula, he just needed to rewrite the story and uses this same resource to send the heroes to Pelican Island. When they arrive there, they are surrounded by dozens of birds that keeps trying to devour them. Sandy then shows the paper she found in the sea and SpongeBob has an idea to get them out of that place. He plucks a feather from one of those pelicans and uses the ink released by Squidward to rewrite the end of the story. The team disappears and Plankton, who has been hiding in SpongeBob's sock all this time, is given the opportunity to modify the story however he wants. Meanwhile, at Krabby Patty's home, Burger Beard is earning more and more money, but his happiness comes to an end when SpongeBob and his friends return. Now they are much bigger and with superpowers. Squidward uses his clarinet to drive people away and Patrick uses his mind power to attract the ice creams around him, but instead of using them as a weapon, he starts eating them. The pirate takes advantage of the distraction to try to rewrite the story, but is stopped by Mr. Krabs and his mechanical arm. SpongeBob uses his bubbles to steal the book, and as they celebrate their victory, the man manages to escape. Just then, Sandy appears and her friends can barely recognize her, as she has become a giant squirrel. Upon realizing that Burger Beard has escaped, the team goes after him and Patrick manages to catch up. To get rid of the giant starfish, the pirate releases his anchor and the heroes are shot down. However, they soon get up and continue the chase. SpongeBob uses the anchor to try to stop Burger Beard from getting the book, and Squidward gives a little help. The bubble bursts and the book falls onto the grill the man used to make the burgers. Seeing the book on fire, Burger Beard is enraged. Sandy attacks him with a peanut machine gun, but he uses his spatula to get rid of the attack. So Patrick springs into action and, once again, uses his powers to attract a slew of ice cream. However, now that he managed to deliver a powerful blow, he ended up becoming a victim of his own attack. When victory seemed to be assured, Mr. Krabs appears and uses his mechanical arms to take down the pirate, but is attacked back and thrown away. Now, SpongeBob is the only one who can stop that man, but he is bombarded by countless cannons. At that moment, he comes up with the idea of using his superpower to form bubbles around the bullets and thus avoid being hit. His plan works for a while, but he is distracted by seeing Patrick getting hurt and ends up getting bombed. After defeating all the heroes, Burger Beard retrieves the formula and tries to escape. What he didn't expect was that Plankton would show up at that place. His body is completely transformed and the little guy has now become a mountain of muscle.